I want to talk a little bit about having pain in hip flexors. This can also be useful for people who have arthritis in the hip or different kind of hip conditions. Now, of course, it's easier for me to address this individually one-on-one. So some of these techniques may work, some may not, but we can talk about that individually if you're finding some of these techniques are working and some aren't. Sometimes we get a lot of pain into our hip flexors when we're practicing. Remember that you can always practice. It's just a matter of how you approach your practice and how you use different tools so that you can move through practice safely and also feeling the same or better at the end of practice. You have to gauge this. It's a bit of trial and error at first, but through repetition, you start to become very in tune with what's working and what's not. And then you also have to remember that over time, as the tension goes away, you may be able to resume more of a normal looking practice. But remember, there is no normal practice. Practice, the best practice, is about showing up and being aware. Now, one of my students was saying that during her sun salutation B, the lunging into warrior one was problematic. So there's different things we can do to help accommodate for this. And one thing we can do is, as you're coming through, you're lowering in your push-up, you're inhaling in up dog, you're exhaling into down dog. Instead of pivoting and lunging, this action can put a lot of compression here and cause more discomfort. So instead, from down dog, we come to our knees. And the first thing is just to pause, check in. We might be able to slowly lean back, which is creating a bit of compression, taking our right hand, pulling our calf forward. And from here, maybe this is it. Maybe this is our maximum and this is where we're going to stop. Or maybe we can continue to lengthen up, creating a neutral spine. For more support, you can hold on to your knee. And another thing you can do is treat the poses like they're a vinyasa. So try not to be stagnant. So as you come up, you can inhale, look up. Exhale, looking round. Inhale, look up, get length. Exhale, look in and round. So anytime you hold a posture for 5 breaths, you're planting a big seed. If you're working for rehabilitation or therapy, maybe you go into it and you treat the pose like a vinyasa. You inhale, unfurl into the pose, look up. You exhale, connect in. You inhale, unfurl. You exhale, connect in. And moving in a pose rather than holding in stillness is a great way to approach an injury because it allows you to plant a little seed rather than holding in stillness. Now, another posture that can be challenging would be any of the lunging postures. So we have warrior 2, we have side angle, and one thing that can be useful, I'm up in Whistler and I don't have any yoga blocks. So ideally you would have a yoga block, maybe 2, or a yoga block and a bolster. I have 2 pillows for my sofa and 1 blanket. Let's say I'm going into a side angle stretch on my left side, and this is perhaps the side that is more problematic. So I start very high. I know you can't see my face, but I'm in a very small space, so this is the best I can do. But from here, I could approach the posture. This is my hand. I'm putting my hand on the wall. You can't quite see it, but this is giving me more foundation, more bandha. My knee is above my ankle. And if I want to modify less, I just keep getting smaller. If I'm like, no, I feel nothing, I'm still okay in my hip flexor, then I can go a little bit deeper into it. But I use the connection of the knee and shin. So notice I'm not having the blocks up here, but they're down here. So they're going all the way down my shin. So if you have yoga blocks, try 2 yoga blocks or a yoga block and a bolster that's vertical to the wall. You need something hard. This is a little soft, it works, but if I add my hand, it actually works even better. Anytime you add support, it creates more bandha, which is going to help you connect to your core and take some of the pressure off of the hip flexor that's sore. So this could be side angle, starting up here. As you get more comfortable, you can go wider. Way more comfortable would be here, but again, that might be too much. eventually here, and eventually you could do it like a vinyasa. Inhale up, exhale back down. Inhale up, exhale back down. Inhale up. Okay. That same principle can also apply for Virabhadrasana, the warrior pose. Now, when we get into seated, it can also be a little bit problematic with the hip flexors. For some people, they're not going to feel too much. But as we get into the half lotus postures, or especially the Marichyasana postures, it can be more challenging. If you already feel it when you go into half lotus, make sure you watch my How to Get into Half Lotus Mindfully video first. But to get into half lotus, maybe you start to feel it. Maybe you don't. If you don't, you can ignore this. But if you start to feel it, I would recommend grabbing your sweatshirt, blanket, pillow, prop, and just propping yourself higher than you normally would. So if my leg naturally rests here, I'm actually taking some of the flexibility out of the pose and I'm propping myself higher. This can also be used in Janu Shirshasana. So in Janu Shirshasana, instead of just getting into it, we bend the legs straight in. From there, we press the sole of the foot to the inner thigh and we create some contraction. And we slowly, rather than just letting the leg flop down, we slowly release down, checking in with the hip flexor. You might say, oh, you know what, I need it a little bit higher. Even if you look like this with your knee pointing up, this is your starting point. And don't forget, the first time you practice in a more modified way, it may be hard to not be so mental. So give yourself a few practices to get into the breath, to really understand the breathing technique, and to use the vinyasas to help you go back to the breath. The breath will heal everything, but don't forget that. So always use your vinyasas. That's really important. The same thing as you work into, say, the final poses, Padmasana. If you're going in, immediately you feel it, you could, again, arch to inner thigh, bring the foot up, keep that connection, spread the toes to create a bit of resistance in the toe, and just let the foot be propped higher. Perhaps don't hold in this position as long as you normally do. Maybe you're going to do your final meditation instead of in lotus. You're going to do it with your legs straight out in front. Remember, these are all temporary measures. But what's the most important thing about a yoga practice is how do you practice all the time in a way that rejuvenates you and heals you. The practice will never look the same. Postures you think you had will go away, but they'll come back in a new form. So remember that the practice is always changing. Now, the other challenging area for hip flexors or hip issues can also be the Marichasanas. Sometimes as soon as we draw this leg in for Marichasana A, B, C, or D, we instantly feel the tightness come. One of my teachers, John Scott, would have us lean. So on your first side, you lean to the left, you bend the leg in. Notice I didn't pull it in, I just bent it in. So mine's going to about here. What if your leg just goes to here? Perfect. For a while, maybe this is the only place you can go where there's no pain. Then just let your knee rock back and forth in a very relaxed movement. See where there's sensation. Do you feel better here? Do you feel worse here? Perhaps when you cross the midline, you can really feel that tightening, or perhaps not. But become aware, and wherever you end up, just find a still place, and then maybe this is Marichie, or maybe this is Marichie, and maybe this is Marichie. Inhale, unfurl, exhale, look in. Inhale, unfurl, exhale, look in. This might be Marichie C too. Inhale, exhale, round. Inhale, exhale, round. Inhale, exhale, round. And if I want to incorporate the twist, then I just continue this as I twist into it. You can also do it letting the knee be very relaxed as the motion is, or as the breathing continues. So it's really a matter of playing around with how your body feels and being creative. If there's sharp pain, it's probably not a good sign. So you just need to find some modifications that you can temporarily use to make it better. But remember that it's easy to think that yoga, we're always advancing and getting better and having new postures, but the yoga is really about yoking with the challenging moments. So if you have a challenge, don't despair. Get on your mat and just create a new way. And let that way start with the breath. Let that way start with the bandha. And let that way incorporate the drishti. The drishti, the breathing, with the connection of bandha will really help you become intuitive and aware. You may have a few mental practices in the journey as you're trying to figure out if you need to prop or different ways you could do it. But over time, you'll find your flow. And when you find your flow, let the breath take over. And then in a few weeks, say, you know what, maybe I can go a little bit deeper. And you'll say, oh, no, I can't, or yes, I can. So enjoy the journey. It's ever evolving. And keep practicing. Namaste.